Tonight, Cyclone Alfred toys with southeast Queensland, keeping residents on tenterhooks as it slows its march towards the coast. Hello, I'm Jessica Van Vonderen, live from Brisbane. This is ABC News Queensland. Gold Coast residents told to take shelter tonight, while Brisbane Airport shuts down. A warning to cyclone sightseers to take the storm seriously. And what to do at home when Alfred finally arrives. Good evening. Cyclone Alfred has slowed its pace but not its punch. The tropical system is now expected to cross the southeast Queensland coast early on Saturday. Its force is already being felt, with huge waves pummelling the Gold Coast and anyone risking going into the ocean or even onto the beach. Brisbane streets were eerily quiet today as residents prepared for Alfred's arrival. Across the border, emergency evacuation warnings have been issued for the northern rivers as the system approaches. From Brisbane, reporter Mark Willisey begins our coverage.
The Category 2 system may have slowed, but Cyclone Alfred is not losing its punch. Surging surf on the Gold Coast, wiping out anyone reckless enough to put themselves or their cars in their path. Record-breaking waves have already been clocked, one over 12 metres high.
No way!
The already slow-moving system doubled back momentarily last night, delaying its arrival.
What we've seen overnight in terms of the erratic movement of the system reiterates the fact that this is an evolving situation.
It's now forecast to cross Queensland's coast as late as Saturday morning. Coastal islands like Stradbroke and Moreton will be hit first, and they're already feeling Alfred's long reach.
The wind has intensified. We've had gusts over the last sort of 24 hours, but now it feels really constant.
Brisbane was calm this morning, with plenty of people making the most of the unexpected fine weather.
Well, I did my last walk yesterday thinking this was not going to be available, so it was a surprise this morning when you saw blue sky.
Feels like Christmas. There's not many people on the roads, but the weather's perfect, so...
The CBD was a ghost town, as many followed the advice to stay home.
It just seems to be taking so long to get here.
All you're hearing is Alfred, Alfred, Alfred. It's kind of like COVID, and you just kind of want it to move on and we can deal with it.
Airports made the call to close, the last flights in or out this afternoon, ahead of expected strong winds and intense rain.
This is significant rainfall that won't only cause flash flooding in the areas that, of the most impacted areas, but prolonged riverine flooding, and it's important that we are now preparing.
On the shores of Moreton Bay, hundreds of homes are at serious risk of inundation.
This place, when it gets heavy rain, it's come in before, so we're expecting it to be even worse.
We are going to cop it, it's just a matter of how bad.
The wind is really starting to pick up now at Brisbane's Moreton Bay, and if we swing around here, you can see that just 30 metres from this shoreline is a facility housing this community's most vulnerable. There are 80 nursing home residents there, and speaking to the people who run this facility, they say at this stage there is no plan to evacuate the residents. Health authorities insist it's not predicted to flood and is safe for both patients and staff.
Wherever possible, you don't want to move elderly people wherever it's safe to do so. So often it's a case of, can we get them to a higher level? Are we able to have power in place in case there's vulnerabilities with some of their generation at flood levels?
Late this afternoon, conditions took a turn. Just the beginning of what Cyclone Alfred will bring. Mark Willisey, ABC News, Brisbane.
The Premier joins us live now. Mr Crisafulli, thank you once again for your time. I think people were a little bit surprised this morning to wake up to some blue skies and sunshine. What are conditions likely to be like tomorrow morning?
Yeah, we're likely to see a little bit more wind, a little bit more rain and eventually the prospect of flooding, Jess. Overnight the system spun around on itself and then it moved very slowly, and that was the delay in that timing of that crossing, but it does continue to head towards the coast. And so whilst that is frustrating, it gave us a little bit more of a window as a state, but also individuals, just to do that little bit more preparation. So look, overwhelmingly, Jessica, I couldn't be more pleased with the way that people have responded. And you'll always get your odd element of people who have done silly things, and we've seen a bit of that. But overwhelmingly, the way that people have responded has been first class. And what that does is that means that we can go from response to recovery mode so much more seamlessly. So far, so good.
And is it your understanding that this system is now expected to hit the mainland as a Category 1?
Well, at this stage it's still a 2, and it is heading towards us at about somewhere a little under 10 kilometres an hour, which has slowed. The modelling is showing that it will reach those islands as a 2. We are hoping that it does. It does break down as it gets closer to the mainland. With that, there's still the prospect of some really heavy rain. So when cyclones happen, it's often the wind is your first challenge, but then there's that prospect of large amounts of rain that can lead to that flooding. So we're urging people, just know where you are, have a look at those maps on that disaster.qld website, and just make your preparations. And if you're not in one of those areas, do the little things around the house, stay safe, and I've got every faith Queenslanders will get through it.
Premier, we really appreciate your time again tonight. Thank you.
And I appreciate what you're doing too, Jess. Thanks very much.
Well, despite warnings to stay inside, thousands of Gold Coast residents flock to the beach to catch a glimpse of what could be a once-in-a-lifetime swell. But authorities are now threatening huge fines for anyone who refuses to get out of the ocean.
Sunshine beat down on a striking Gold Coast morning, masking the imminent danger inching towards the mainland.
All this chaos, but yet we're just waiting in trepidation to see what actually comes of it.
With no school and no work, massive crowds were drawn to witness Mother Nature at her most ferocious.
I've been here about 15 years and never seen it like this. It's crazy.
It's rough, it looks angry. It's another level.
Families lapping up the outdoor freedom.
It's hard with 2 3-year-olds to just stay at home all day, so here we are.
Before the window closes and it's time to bunker down.
Make the most of it before we're stuck inside for the next 3 days.
While breathtaking for spectators, the power surging beneath is not to be underestimated.
I'm just staggered that people would be so stupid.
By afternoon, the rain had set in, and conditions are only expected to get more dangerous as tropical cyclone Alfred bears down.
So our threat will start to begin from tonight, escalate into tomorrow, into Saturday, and likely not ease until late Saturday evening or into Sunday.
While authorities recognise this massive swell is exciting to witness, it's now too dangerous to be near the ocean. Police say because the city is under a disaster declaration, they have the power to hand out $16,000 fines to anyone caught acting recklessly.
We've had situations where sand has given away, the beach has given away while people are walking on it. You've all seen the footage, it is dangerous.
Those big seas led this cruise ship to delay its arrival into Brisbane.
The decision was made to actually extend the cruise by another 3 days. We are concerned about what we'll find when we get home.
A sentiment being echoed across the region. Mackenzie Colohan, ABC News, Gold Coast.
Sunshine Coast residents are being put on notice that they haven't escaped the wrath of Cyclone Alfred. While the region isn't expected to take a direct hit, days of heavy rain and destructive winds are still expected.
Alfred's delayed arrival is a blessing for Pastor Dale Dowler. Extra time to help more people.
And we're going to be picking up a couple of people and their fur babies and moving them onto the evac centre.
Taylor Lay and Anthony Jones have been living in a tent at Anambor Park. They're off to an evacuation centre.
We were sort of resisting at first, but thought, well, it's just simpler to do that, and a lot of our people are going over there, so it'll be all right.
The trees and that, if they break or that, then you could be laying down and a tree could land on top of you.
The system should cross south of the Sunshine Coast, meaning the region should be spared the worst of the wind and rain.
I think the biggest thing that we're mainly concerned about is actually the surge in the tides, but
a little bit lucky in one way. The tides are a little bit lower in the next week than what they would be on a peak high.
Now that it's gone south, I think the expectation of it coming over the road isn't too bad.
With preparations done, many made the most of the last rays of sunshine.
That's why we're out at the moment, getting as much exercise as we can while we can.
Kelly Matthews took a mercy mission yesterday to drive her mum up from Brisbane and her aunt up from low-lying Pelican Waters.
I would have stayed there and just sort of hid under the bed. But no, it's good that I'm not there.
They'll stay under one roof until the system passes.
It's still concerning, but I know where everyone is and what they're doing and how they're faring.
With all schools shut, it left the day open for family fun. They'll be climbing the walls at home soon enough.
We're trying to capture a few moments outdoors before we get locked up again.
My wife is a teacher and I teach as well in a couple of local schools, and yeah, a bit of a long holiday.
Authorities don't want Sunshine Coast residents to get a false sense of security. The risks are real, even if it doesn't seem too bad right now.
And we could still be in the firing line for what's to come. From this evening, I ask people to remain in their homes.
The big rains are expected to come over the weekend.
We understand that those figures could be above 100 millimetres of rainfall per day.
As the anxious wait stretches out for another 24 hours. Jessica Ross, ABC News, Sunshine Coast.
So when we get to the pointy end of the cyclone actually arriving, where should you go in your house? We talked to the experts to find out. Whether you're in a Queenslander on stumps or a low-set brick house, the message is to stay calm. During a cyclone, the safest place to be is inside. Try to stay away from windows. And then think about the strongest and safest place in your house. That's often the smallest room, so something like a bathroom or a laundry or even a walk-in wardrobe. And this is the kind of place you might want to come if conditions start to get really hairy. And at what point do you need to go into that room?
Look, I think it's going to be an individual judgment, and you may find as you progress through it that you don't go into that particular room. You may find that you're very comfortable with where you are, but even just knowing it's there, that you can move into there, is a great thing.
Take a radio and a phone so you can keep across all of the latest information. Some food, water, a torch in case the power goes out, and maybe some games or just something to distract the kids, because all of the noise might be scary for them. How long should you expect to be inside?
Look, it will be a number of hours, and I can't give you an exact number because, of course, the cyclone may move quickly, the cyclone may move slowly.
So how do you know when it's safe to come out? Well, the advice is to keep an eye on the Bureau of Meteorology's website and also your local council's disaster dashboard.
Sometimes when a cyclone goes directly over, you'll actually have a quiet time, and it's important to know that that may not be the end of the cyclone, so to stay aware of that. But I would hasten away and be very careful. Sometimes you'll see down power lines and other dangers outside, so just because you can go out, it doesn't mean you should be going far.
And don't forget your pets, of course, food, water, anything you can do to try and keep them happy too. For many residents in northern New South Wales, this could be their third major flood in 8 years. Many are making their final preparations in a bid to avoid losing their homes and businesses all over again.
They're all completely drilled to the wall.
Murwillumbah resident Sarah Robertson is used to preparing for disaster.
Building everything in, that's the trick, because anything that's light enough to float, it will.
Mud still clings to the ceiling of her garage 3 years after flood waters swept through her property.
You can still see the mud on the floorboards.
She spent the day moving her valuables into this nearby motel.
This is, I think, our 5th or 6th flood evacuation visit.
But knowing what to expect hasn't made it any easier.
Our children have only known floods. Riley's, he just turned 11 on Tuesday, and you know, we've been having floods for 10 years now. So, you know, it's been his whole life. So it's terrible that they get used to disaster.
Cane farmer Robert Quirk is all too aware of the damage Mother Nature can cause.
You'll probably see the water starting to pour into the funnel.
Heavy flooding in 2022 nearly ruined his crops.
Well over $100,000. We were lost income. Oh, it's not good. There's some people who really struggle to come out of this.
As flood warnings came through, many fled to higher ground. Tubbulgum's centre virtually a ghost town as residents hunkered down.
It's been a slow burn. We've had many days warning and we don't know how high the river's going to go.
The Northern Rivers is known for its resilience, but as it prepares for its third potential major flood in just 8 years, some are questioning the future of building in the region altogether.
Because we're concerned that you can't put other people at risk or you can't keep filling up the floodplain because it's cheap to develop and easy.
A sleepless night ahead for a region that's been through it all before. Victoria Pingilly, ABC News, Murwillumbah.
Well, let's bring in Jenny Woodward now. Jenny, now that the cyclone's arriving a day later, what does that mean?
Well, it means that we have quite significant implications, Jess. Hello, everyone. The cyclone stalled overnight and it really stayed in the one spot for some time, but it is on the move again now. It's sitting about 225 kilometres east of Brisbane and it's moving west-northwest at 8 kilometres an hour. Now, Alfred's path is certainly slow and erratic, and it's going to shift the intensity and the duration of the impacts, including an extended period of flooding rain. Now, after the cyclone hits, that rain will persist for at least 48 hours. The late arrival partly explained by yesterday's irregular path, and that was interrupted by that 12-hour loop overnight, keeping it in much the same spot. Now, while the eye is currently around 200 kilometres offshore, the wide field of gales and cloud is already lashing the coast. The latest modelling shows Alfred crossing the coast anywhere from late tomorrow into the early hours of Saturday morning. However, the destructive core will start to impact the coast tomorrow. Now, remembering it's the southern side of the system that's most dangerous, so coastal erosion will continue with the largest waves from Cape Morton to Coffs Harbour. But the most extreme weather for many regions will be rain. The greatest intensity now arriving late Friday and particularly Saturday. We could see 6-hour totals of up to 250 millimetres and 24-hour totals to 450 millimetres. Now, of course, this represents life-threatening totals and is certain to cause severe flash and riverine flooding. Friday's rain will be the heaviest from the Gold Coast to Port Macquarie in the moist easterly winds to Alfred South, but we'll get plenty of rain on Saturday as well. And following landfall on Saturday, winds and surf should start to ease. However, the rain will be increasing in many areas on the weekend, even well after Alfred is downgraded to a tropical low. So we could see plenty more heavy falls, which means it will exacerbate river levels and the already flooded catchments. So we still have plenty of things to go with this system, Jess, but there's a lot more other weather happening around the state, and I'll be back with all those weather details later.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, now for the rest of the day's news, we'll hand over to Lexy Hamilton-Smith in the studio. Lexy.
Thanks, Jess. Good evening. Cyclone Alfred is upending the Prime Minister's election plans. Anthony Albanese hasn't ruled out calling the poll this weekend, but he insists his focus is solely on the cyclone and its aftermath. Here's National Affairs correspondent Jane Norman.
From Queensland,
please be prepared, please stay informed,
to Canberra.
We're now anticipating a later crossing.
The Prime Minister's putting his disaster credentials on show.
We are there to support you. We have your back.
The states are responsible for responding to natural disasters, but Anthony Albanese is all too aware of the fierce backlash federal governments can cop for being too slow to act. With an election looming, this disaster has an added political dimension.
There are no political parties in this process and there are no borders.
Council recovery funds have been approved even before the cyclones made landfall. Hundreds of thousands of sandbags have been delivered and choppers pre-positioned, while dozens of defence personnel are going door to door to identify at-risk people.
The Australian Defence Force will be there and every capability that we can bring to bear.
The Prime Minister has cancelled a trip to Perth this weekend where he was planning to celebrate a likely Labor win in the state election before calling the federal election for April 12. It's long been his preferred date, but he has to call it by Monday. If he misses that window, he could be forced to hand down a budget and go to the polls in May. With the cyclone heading towards his own Brisbane electorate, Peter Dutton has argued now's not the time to call it.
I think it's really the occasion for the Prime Minister to be governing, not campaigning.
But those comments have raised eyebrows because the night before, he was nowhere near Brisbane. As revealed in the Australian Financial Review, the opposition leader had flown to Sydney for an event, followed by a political fundraiser at the harbourside mansion of billionaire Justin Hems.
That'd be disappointing if it's true. I'm not sure if it is. I think that's for Peter Dutton to explain.
Privately, some Liberals think so too. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
A Supreme Court jury has been taken to an isolated beach where a young woman was murdered in far north Queensland. 24-year-old Toya Cordingley was walking her dog in broad daylight when she was killed 6 years ago north of Cairns. Rawinda Swing has pleaded not guilty.
Casual dress for the gravest of matters. Supreme Court Justice James Henry traded his robes for shorts and a hat as proceedings moved from the courthouse to Wongetti Beach, north of Cairns. Under police escort, the jury was bussed to the scene where it's alleged Toya Cordingley was murdered in October 2018. She died after her throat was cut. Police allege nurse and father of three, Rawinda Singh, killed her and left the country in the following days. The View arranged for the jury of 8 men and 4 women to provide locational context, beginning with where the 24-year-old's car was found. Jurors then walked several kilometres up the beach, with traffic cones marking points of interest, including the site where Miss Cordingley's body was found and where her dog was tied to a tree. This extraordinary sitting of a Supreme Court session follows on from emotional scenes in court yesterday when the wife of the accused gave evidence. Speaking through a Punjabi interpreter, Sukhdeep Kaur told the court she had not seen or spoken to her husband in 6 years, and nor had their children. She told the court Singh left their family home in Innisfail carrying only a little handbag and said he would be back the next day. It would be 4 years before he was extradited back to Australia and charged with Miss Cordingley's murder. The trial continues. Christy Sexton-McGrath, ABC News, Cairns.
Overseas now, and the US president has warned Hamas of hell to pay if it doesn't release all remaining hostages in Gaza. It came after the White House revealed it had dispatched an envoy for talks with the Palestinian militant group. But in doing so, the US has broken a decades-old policy of not negotiating with groups that it brands as a terrorist organisation.
A new military chief with the same message for the nation.
We will not forgive or forget. This is a war of survival. We will continue the campaign to return our hostages and achieve victory.
As he spoke, hundreds gathered at kibbutz near Oz, where Ohad Yahalomi, kidnapped nearly a year and a half ago, was laid to rest.
Since October the 7th, it seems the clouds of darkness have been creeping in and covering every good corner.
Ohad's body was returned from Gaza as part of the first phase of the ceasefire deal that has since expired. As negotiations stall over the future of the agreement, the US president issued what he called a final warning, calling Hamas sick and twisted and demanding they release the hostages now or there'll be hell to pay later. His comments coming amid reports the US had met the group in secret, breaking with long-standing protocol not to negotiate with terrorist organisations.
The special envoy who's engaged in those negotiations does have the authority to talk to anyone. Israel was consulted on this matter.
In the war-ravaged Gaza Strip, food security is worsening. The UN has called on Israel to lift its blockade on aid in line with international law.
And to allow and facilitate the safe, unconditional, massive and unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid at scale.
Hopes for recovery are short-lived as the future of the deal hangs in the balance. Eric Twarchek, ABC News.
To finance now, and here is David Chow.
Well, today was one of those rare days where the Aussie dollar actually did well. It's buying almost 63.5 US cents after rising by more than 1%. Now, it's not exactly because our economy has been exceptional lately, but because the US dollar has been tumbling. In fact, the greenback has wiped out all the gains it made since Donald Trump's first day in office and his election victory back in November. So the reality might be starting to sink in, which is that American consumers will actually be worse off, as trade wars will make things more expensive for them. And that's despite Donald Trump's claims that tariff is a beautiful word and a tax against other countries, which it actually isn't. And our friends in the US are certainly worried, judging from the surge in the number of people Googling the word recession, which may partly explain why the US president backtracked slightly on his trade war. He's now offering car makers like Ford and General Motors a 1-month exemption on the 25% tariff that is slapped on Mexico and Canada. So markets breathed a sigh of relief, with shares in the US and Asia recovering from their recent sell-offs. But no such luck here, as the All Ords is down 0.4%, while the ASX 200 did a little bit worse with its 0.6% fall. But when you zoom out, things look a little bit more grim. As you can see, the ASX has fallen quite sharply from its recent record high, and is even lower now than where it started the year. Now, the biggest drags on the market today were banks and miners, as well as the oil and gas giant Woodside, after the price of oil fell to its lowest level in 3 years, as Trump's trade war is expected to weigh quite heavily on oil demand. With any luck, it should hopefully lead to cheaper petrol prices here. And that's finance.
Now let's bring in Jenny Woodward again. There's so much happening there, Jenny. What's the latest?
Well, Lexy, interestingly, we woke up to blue skies and sunshine this morning, but the weather closed in pretty quickly and we've got a bit of rain around right now. But Tropical Cyclone Alfred is certainly on the move again. It's sitting about 200 kilometres offshore and it's moving slowly at about 7 to 8 kilometres an hour, expected to make landfall early Saturday morning just north of Brisbane. Destructive winds could develop late tonight on the Gold Coast, which at this stage is likely to bear the brunt of the system, along with northern New South Wales. Damaging winds, which means gusts of up to 120 kilometres an hour, will arrive first, with localised destructive winds. Now, they're more likely about the islands and the coastal fringe, but they also bring the risk of waterspouts and tornadoes. But then it'll be all about the rain. We're looking at 200 to 500 millimetres on the 24 hours, potentially 800 to a metre on the border ranges. So, of course, that risk of flash and riverine flooding is high. And while it might drop back to a Category 1, the slow speed means it will linger longer and bring more rain, and it's still expected to coincide with the high tide, pushing those levels well above normal. There are massive swells already, over 15 metres off the Tweed coast today. Elsewhere across the state, we've seen some storms over northern and eastern parts, and it's been pretty hot too. Temperatures well above average. Urandangi the hottest on 43, while it got to 36 in Bundaberg. Brisbane reached 27 in spite of the rain coming in, 29 that is, 27 on the Gold Coast. Let's look at the satellite, and away from the cyclone you can see those storms developing across the north. There were some severe cells near the tropical coast where it's been hot. Interstate tomorrow, a shower or two for Sydney, and Darwin, the usual storm possible. Let's look at the chart, and we've got that inland trough triggering those showers and storms, and the unsettled weather will persist as the cyclone brings in more moisture. Let's check forecasts now, and in the north, still hot and stormy, 33 the top for Cairns. Inland parts will be partly cloudy, especially in the southwest. Some storms are possible north of Blackall, Roma heading for 37. In the southeast, remember the Gold Coast will bear the full brunt of the wind and rain well in advance of the cyclone's actual crossing, but the whole region will feel the cyclonic effect. For For Brisbane, a top of 26. Late tomorrow we'll see those really heavy falls, up to 60 millimetres possible, and some storms. On the bay, winds above 48 knots, seas and swell exceeding 6 metres. The cyclonic conditions will stay with us for up to 24 hours, rain lingering well into next week. And for the latest emergency information, tune into your local ABC frequency wherever you are. So Lexy, there's high confidence in the forecast, but there's still uncertainty about the timing of the crossing.
Certainly is. Thanks, Jenny. Such a big day with more to come. Good night from us for now.